All right. Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you. My name is Chiraag Bains. Until recently, I was the Deputy Director of the Domestic Policy Council and Deputy Assistant to the President for Racial Justice and Equity. And that, of course, is the subject of our panel. And I want to start with the President, Joe Biden. He has said that he made the decision to run for president after neo-Nazis marched in Charlottesville, carrying torches and spewing anti-Semitic and racist bile. He said we're in the battle for the soul of the nation. He also said he thought that this could be the generation that could finally wipe the stain of racism from our national character. And when he took office, President Joe Biden made equity a central pillar of his administration. Now, I had the privilege of leading and shepherding some of that work from the White House, but it was really in the agencies that that work was getting done, and it is getting done day in and day out. And so I'm very pleased to introduce our panelists to talk about this today. We have Dominique Duval-Diop. Dominique, from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, has some news today. That is that as of today, you have a new title, Dominique,
That's
Chief
right.
Data Scientist of the United States. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's an honor.
And Robert Shriver. Robert is the Deputy Director of the Office of Personnel Management, critical to what every agency is doing. Please welcome Robert.
All right.
Okay, Dominique, Rob, let's get into this here. The president, on day one of his administration, very first day, issued an executive order on equity and racial justice. He said that every agency has the responsibility to serve underserved communities, to look at barriers to their programs and activities, and to remove those barriers. And when he talks about equity, and this executive order talked about equity, it meant people of color, religious minorities, people who live in rural communities that have suffered from disinvestment, LGBTQI+ Americans, and other folks who have just been left behind or not fully served by government programs. He recently updated that, issued a new executive order doubling down on equity a couple of months ago. He also issued an executive order on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA for short. That is about strengthening the federal workforce so it reflects the full diversity of America. Now, as I said, your agencies are tasked with implementing all of this. What are your agencies doing to implement these two mandates? Dominique, I want to start with you.
Great. So before I got this new role as of today, I spent the past year as the Deputy U.S. Chief Data Scientist working with federal agencies to establish mechanisms to ensure the equitable delivery of our federal programs. And so I did this by helping agencies to collect and use their data to identify those disparities and then use government policies and programs to address them. So let me give you a couple examples of what I'm talking about. President Biden set up a goal of 15%, awarding 15% of federal contracts to small disadvantaged businesses. And in order to ensure that they're tracking progress towards that goal, the Small Business Administration developed a dashboard. They were able to track that progress, and they put it out to the public, including disaggregated data. And so the public can look up the proportion of, say, Hispanic businesses that are being awarded federal contracts and then hold the administration accountable for working towards that goal. Another example is the White House recently released in January the LGBTQI+ evidence agenda, which developed a roadmap for federal agencies to use data to advance equity for LGBTQI+ people in many domains, including housing and safety. The co-chairs of that work pulled together a group of people that had deep expertise in data and statistics, but also a diversity of lived experiences. And this is really important, so if I can take a few seconds
Please.
to talk about representation, because people are policy. Having someone like me, a child of immigrants who grew up on the south side of Chicago, occupying this role in the White House of the U.S. Chief Data Scientist sends a powerful message, not only to our federal data workforce, but also to data scientists across society. So in many of my positions, I've been the first or the only black woman. And that's changing, but we need to expand our efforts to diversify our federal workforce, which is why I'm so happy to be a part of this administration because of their commitment to creating a more diverse federal workforce.
Well, thank you, Dominique. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's actually a perfect segue to Rob. Rob, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chiraag. I'm Rob Shriver, and I am represent OPM, the strategic HR agency of the federal government. And let me just say, first and foremost, that a diverse workforce is a stronger workforce. It's a workforce that's better able to serve the American people, and the federal government needs to be a model in this space, and that's what we've been working on from day one of this administration. I want to just highlight a couple things around hiring and around pay equity that we're doing at OPM. First, we're trying to remove barriers to getting federal jobs for diverse communities. One of the ways that we're doing that is by removing unnecessary college degree requirements. This has been a multi-year effort for the federal government. And you know, we have laws that limit the use of college degrees, but they creep into the HR process. So we've been working through an interagency process to really root out those unnecessary requirements. Another thing that we're doing to try to remove barriers is implementing the Fair Chance to Compete Act. So this law builds on the Ban the Box initiatives that were started under President Obama, and it means that you can't ask about somebody's criminal history until after they've made it through the hiring process and you've decided on a selection. And then what this regulation would do, that's right, it's very important. And what the regulation does is hold agencies accountable, make sure that their hiring managers are following the law. And then lastly, I was really pleased to announce last week at a roundtable at the White House that OPM has proposed regulations that would eliminate consideration of prior salary history in setting salary for federal jobs. The federal government actually has one of the most equitable pay systems in the country. The gender pay gap is down to 6%, but we don't want those pay gaps that are more prevalent in the private sector creeping in to the federal workplace. So again, rather than looking at a proxy for skills like a college degree or like prior salary, OPM is helping agencies look at the skills and qualifications themselves and set pay based on those.
Right. Well, that's big. That is a big regulation. Congratulations on getting that out.
Yeah.
Let's look at another specific policy area and talk about how these commitments play out. The bipartisan infrastructure law. This is a big deal, $1 trillion in funding that's going to reshape the face of America. $220 billion already out the door or announced. We're talking about roads, bridges, broadband like we just heard about, lead pipes, clean water. What specifically are your agencies doing to ensure that these infrastructure programs are implemented equitably? Rob, do you want to start us?
Sure. Thanks, Chiraag. So we were working with agencies before the law was even passed on what their hiring needs would be, because we knew that they were going to need to staff up to implement the bill, to get the money out the door. And usually what happens is agencies come to us when they're in an urgent situation. They have these critical hiring needs, and we give them flexibilities to use, and they go out and do whatever hiring they need in kind of a crisis situation. This time, we tried to handle it differently. We said, look, we know this is coming. We know you're going to have some serious hiring needs. Let's start by bringing on a bunch of HR folks, and we did a multi-agency hiring action where agencies could kind of combine their recruiting efforts and go through the hiring process, and multiple agencies could hire HR folks off of that same hiring action. And then what we said is, we know that OPM can give you flexibilities, but we're going to give you some flexibilities with strings this time. We know you have an urgent hiring need. We know you need to get out and recruit. We're going to give you these flexibilities, but we want to see that you're advancing DEIA in the federal government as you use these, that you are ensuring pay equity with the new people you bring on. We're going to ask you to collect data on that and report to us so we can make sure that the way you're using these authorities not only helps you with your urgent hiring need, but advances the administration's overall DEIA agenda.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, great.
Dominique, infrastructure.
Yeah. So President Biden is investing in America through this bipartisan infrastructure law, and it represents an enormous opportunity to use data to identify those communities that really need those infrastructure investments. And so Rob talked about the need to diversify the staff and what he's been doing to help federal agencies staff up. Well, what we're doing at OSTP is to help build the capacity of those staff to use that data that's being generated through the implementation of these programs, to use that data to make mid-course corrections. My office is working to support agency staff by using their data to help better deploy their outreach and technical assistance resources so that underserved communities can more successfully apply for these funds.
Great. Okay. Well, we have an audience full of policy wonks. We have people from all over the nation. They know that whether it's infrastructure or any other federal program, whatever the priority is set from the federal government, it's going to depend on implementation at the state and local level as well, in terms of whether these programs are equitably implemented. To close us out, what is one recommendation or idea you could share with our colleagues here to promote better federal, state, and local collaboration toward equitable policymaking and implementation? Dominique.
Local governments need to take advantage of the opportunity to carve out resources in their federal grants to build their enterprise and tech data capacity so that they can incorporate that into every federal grant. And this includes using those resources to hire data talent.
All right, building tech capacity. Put that in your grant applications.
Yep.
Rob.
I think that the federal government can work with states and localities on removing unnecessary college degree requirements and transforming the hiring system to one that's truly skills-based. This is so important, particularly for tech jobs, where folks are learning skills all kinds of different ways. It's really important to assess people on the skills they have and not where they learned them. So we've seen some great announcements from states like Pennsylvania, I believe Maryland recently. The federal government has been on the job for a few years here on this, and we look forward to partnering with those states to really drive this change across the entire country.
Yep.
All right. Well, please join me in thanking Rob and Dominique. Take care.